When did a substitute teacher become your worst enemy? I was in biology class when a sharp pain hit my right side. I doubled over, clutching my desk. That's when the lockdown alarm drill started blaring. Everyone under your desks now! The substitute, Mr. Herbert, was already at the door with zip ties. My stomach! Something's wrong, I gasped. He spun around, face red. Nice try. Get under your desk like everyone else. I think it's my appendix. You think I was born yesterday? Kids always fake sick during drills. ZIP. The plastic zip tie sealed our only exit. Please, I need the nurse. The only thing you need is to follow protocol. The pain was spreading now, like someone was inflating a balloon inside me. I tried to crawl under my desk, but screamed when I bent. That's when I noticed him smile, just slightly. Funny how you're suddenly sick when there's a drill. Just like how you were suddenly sick when I was here last month. Then I remembered. I'd thrown up during his class, and my mom had complained when he wouldn't let me leave. This was revenge. The pain moved from sharp to explosive, like my insides were being torched. I couldn't stop the tears. Please, hurts so bad. Drama club's down the hall, sweetie. He actually laughed. Zeynep, the girl heading to pre-med at Johns Hopkins, crawled over to me. Where exactly does it hurt? I pointed to my right side. She gently pressed down. When she let go, I screamed. That's rebound tenderness. She looked terrified. Her appendix could rupture. Back under your desk or it's suspension. You don't understand. If it bursts, she could die. I said back under your desk. The fire in my gut spread to my back. My whole body was shaking now. Then the vomiting started. Not normal vomiting. Projectile. It hit the wall 3 feet away. Mop it up, Mr. Herbert said coldly. Kids are so useless these days. Lewis, whose dad was a surgeon, had gone pale. That's bile. Green bile. That means she ate something green for lunch. More kids were pulling out phones now, trying to get signal. We all knew the biolab was a dead zone. Mr. Herbert noticed. Phones in the basket. Now. This is a lockdown, not social hour. My fever spiked so fast I could feel sweat pouring down my face. The pain wasn't just in my side anymore. It was everywhere, like my whole body was failing. Check her forehead, someone yelled. Mia reached over. She's burning up, like scary hot. Fevers can be faked. Haven't you seen Ferris Bueller? But now half the class could see something was seriously wrong. My skin had gone from pale to gray. The shaking got worse. Call 911, Zeynep screamed. She needs surgery now. The only thing she needs is detention for disrupting a state-mandated drill. That's when I felt it. Something inside me shifted, like a rubber band snapping. The pain went from unbearable to nothing, just cold. The pain stopped, I whispered. Mr. Herbert smirked. See? Miraculous recovery. Just like I said, no! Zeynep and Louis screamed together. If the pain suddenly stops, that means it ruptured. Even some kids who didn't know biology could tell this was bad. Really bad. My body started convulsing, not shaking anymore. Full convulsions. Mr. Herbert's smirk finally disappeared. Stop! Stop pretending! But I couldn't stop. I couldn't control anything anymore. Beep! Beep! The lockdown alarm was still blaring. Kids were pounding on the windows, trying to get anyone's attention. The biology skeleton crashed to the floor as Trevor tried to break the door down. It's zip-tied! He screamed. Black spots filled my vision. Zeynep was screaming medical terms I couldn't understand anymore. All I knew was that I was cold. So cold. Someone break the window. Text the office. The door won't budge. Mr. Herbert was backing away now. She's faking. Has to be faking. I couldn't see anymore. Just heard voices getting farther away. Then Zeynep's voice, clear as day. If she dies, you murdered her. The last thing I remember was thinking how stupid it was. Dying in bio class because of a substitute teacher's ego. Then nothing. I woke up 3 days later missing 8 inches of intestine and half my colon. The infection had spread so far they had to remove parts of 3 organs. The surgeon said 5 more minutes and I would have died. Technically, I did die. For 38 seconds on the operating table. Mr. Herbert claimed he thought I was acting. The security footage showed his smile when I first complained. Showed him stepping over my convulsing body to maintain door security. He got a 2-week suspension for what the doctors called the worst ruptured appendix they'd ever seen survive. But me and the 22 witnesses in that classroom knew what really happened. And we were going to make sure everyone else did too. 3 days of nothing but beeping machines and burning pain where they'd cut me open, and I finally opened my eyes to see Mom gripping my hand so tight her knuckles were white. The surgeon stood at the foot of my bed holding a clipboard, pointing to different parts of my stomach on a diagram, while explaining how they'd removed 8 inches of my intestine because the infection had spread everywhere. He kept using words like peritonitis and sepsis while Mom nodded like she understood, but I could see her hands shaking as he described cutting out half my colon and parts of 3 other organs. The anger hit me harder than the morphine drip ever could. This hot rage that Mr. Herbert had done this to me because he thought I was faking. The surgeon pulled out his phone and started swiping through photos from the surgery. These horrible pictures of black tissue that used to be healthy pink, spreading like ink through my insides. He pointed to one particularly dark section and explained that 5 more minutes and the infection would have reached my liver, and there wouldn't have been anything left to save. Mom's face crumpled and she started crying again. These quiet sobs she was trying to hide by turning toward the window. I squeezed her hand back even though moving hurt, and the surgeon kept talking about how lucky I was to be alive, how most people don't survive when it gets this bad. Later that night, when the surgeon had left, my night nurse Brianna Hewitt came in to check my IV and started writing notes in a small notebook she pulled from her pocket. She looked at my chart, then at me, then back at her notebook, writing faster now with this look on her face like she was angry about something. When Mom asked what she was doing, Brianna glanced at the door to make sure no one was listening, then quietly explained she'd been documenting everything for her own records because she'd never seen someone so young nearly die from something so preventable. She wrote down her personal phone number on a napkin and pressed it into Mom's hand, saying to call if we ever needed her to explain what she'd seen in medical terms a jury would understand. The way she said jury made my stomach flip, or what was left of it anyway. That first night was the worst because every time the monitors beat to check my vitals, my whole body would tense up thinking it was the lockdown alarm again. I'd wake up screaming about being trapped under the desk, clawing at the blankets like they were zip ties, and the nurses would have to hold me down while I thrashed around pulling at my stitches. They sedated me twice when I couldn't stop hyperventilating, this heavy drug that made everything fuzzy, but at least stopped the panic that kept flooding through me every time I heard any kind of alarm. The next morning, while I was trying to keep down some ice chips, Mom's phone rang and I could see from her face it was the school calling. The principal's voice was loud enough that I could hear him talking about my extended absence and how they'd need to arrange makeup work. And then he mentioned that Mr. Herbert had received his 2-week suspension for the incident. Mom's voice went so quiet and cold that I'd never heard her sound like that before, asking if he understood that I had literally died for 38 seconds on an operating table. The principal stuttered something about district policy, and Mom hung up on him mid-sentence. My phone had been buzzing all morning with notifications, and when I finally had enough strength to check it, I saw Zeynep had created a group chat with all 22 kids who'd been in that classroom. Everyone was typing at once about how angry they were that Herbert only got 2 weeks, sharing what they remembered. And Louis said his dad, the surgeon, had offered to review my medical records and write up an explanation of exactly how serious a ruptured appendix is. People were sending screenshots of texts from their parents, some supportive and some telling them not to get involved, but everyone in that room knew what they'd seen. I spent the next hour typing with shaking hands, trying to get down every single detail I could remember before the drugs made it fuzzy. Every word Herbert had said, the way he'd smiled when I first said I was sick, how he'd stepped over my convulsing body to maintain door security like I was just an obstacle on the floor. The details felt important, even though remembering made me want to throw up. This sick feeling that wasn't from the surgery, but from knowing he'd wanted me to suffer. Mom helped me organize it all into a timeline, minute by minute, from when the pain started to when I blacked out. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from the school with paperwork for something called a 504 plan meeting to discuss my medical accommodations when I returned. Mom read through it and started laughing, but not a happy laugh, this bitter sound that scared me because she never sounded like that. She said they were more worried about covering themselves legally than whether I could even digest food anymore, pointing to sections about liability waivers and hold harmless agreements. Why did Mr. Herbert smile when she mentioned being sick before? Was this really about some old complaint from her mom? Or does he just enjoy having power over students? The paperwork never mentioned Herbert by name, just kept referring to an unfortunate incident during a safety drill. 2 weeks after surgery, the doctor said I could try going back to the school for half a day to see how I handled it. Mom drove me there early before the hallways got crowded, and I thought I was doing okay until we walked past the biology room. My whole body locked up and I couldn't breathe, this crushing feeling like the walls were closing in. And I ran to the bathroom where the security officer found me 20 minutes later, curled up in a stall, hyperventilating, so bad I couldn't even explain what was wrong. He had to call Mom to come get me, and I heard him telling her that lots of kids have trouble returning after medical trauma, like this was normal. The next day, the vice principal called to schedule a meeting, and when we got there, he kept using the phrase unfortunate incident over and over, like saying it enough would make it true. He suggested we all needed to move forward for the healing process to begin, that dwelling on the past wouldn't help anyone, and that the school was committed to learning from this experience. Mom asked point blank if he'd watched the security footage yet, and he shifted in his chair saying it was still under review pending the district investigation, which was another way of saying they were hoping we'd give up and go away. The next day after school, I texted everyone from the class to meet me in the library. 6 kids showed up right away. We grabbed the big table in the back corner where teachers couldn't hear us. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything I remembered from that day. The way Herbert smiled when I first said I was sick, how he stepped over me when I was on the floor shaking. Mia grabbed a piece of paper and drew where everyone was sitting when it happened. She marked where I collapsed with an X, where Herbert stood by the door, where Zeynep and Louis tried to help me. We spent 2 hours going through every single minute. Everyone remembered different things. Trevor said Herbert actually laughed when I threw up. Someone else remembered him checking his watch while I was having seizures. We wrote it all down before anyone could forget. That night, my phone started buzzing with texts from other kids in the class. The school computers had crashed during last period. The whole network went down. Then Trevor called me crying. His phone had been recording when the lockdown started because he was making a TikTok under his desk. Now all his videos from that day were gone. Not just deleted, but completely wiped. His cloud backup was empty too. 3 other kids said the same thing happened to their phones. Any pictures or videos from that day just disappeared. By the end of the second week home, I could barely stay awake past noon. The pain pills made me so tired I'd fall asleep sitting up. Mom had to blend all my food because my stomach couldn't handle anything solid. Even soup made me throw up. I stood on the scale and almost fell over. 15 pounds gone in 2 weeks. My clothes hung off me like I was wearing my dad's stuff. I looked in the mirror and saw bones sticking out everywhere. My face looked like a skull with skin stretched over it. That's when an email came from someone at the school newspaper. They said they wanted to write about why lockdown rules don't let teachers call 911 during drills. They'd heard about what happened to me and wanted my side of the story. I wrote back that I'd talk, but only if Mom was there with me. We met them at a coffee shop near school. The kid asking questions seemed really mad about the whole thing. They kept shaking their head when I described Herbert refusing to let anyone help. Mom made them promise to check everything with us before printing anything. 2 days later, the district sent out an email about forming a committee to review the incident. Mom read it out loud and started laughing, but it wasn't a happy sound. The committee had 3 assistant principals on it. All of them worked directly under our principal. Nobody from our classroom was invited to join. Not me, not any witnesses, not even our parents. They said they'd share their findings in 6 to 8 weeks. Mom called it a joke, and she was right. The hospital finally sent copies of all my medical records. The stack of papers was thicker than our phone book. Hundreds of pages about the surgery and the infection, and when my heart stopped. Mom asked Louis's dad to look at them since he was a surgeon. He came over that night and spent 3 hours reading everything. Then he wrote a letter explaining it in simple terms. He said the rupture had spread poison through my whole body. He said I was in septic shock when they brought me in. He said 30 more seconds and my organs would have shut down forever. He used the word miracle 4 times in his letter. The 504 meeting was scheduled for the next week. They wanted to talk about accommodations for when I came back to the school. The paperwork said they give me extra time on tests, permission to leave class for the bathroom whenever I needed, a special pass to eat lunch in the nurse's office if the cafeteria was too loud. Mom asked why there was nothing about fixing the actual lockdown rules. The woman running the meeting said that wasn't what 504 plans were for. She said they were just trying to help me succeed academically. Mom asked how I was supposed to succeed when I was scared of dying in the school again. Nobody answered her. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from the district's lawyer. It was addressed to all the parents of kids who were in the classroom that day. The letter strongly suggested we shouldn't talk to reporters or post on social media about the pending matter. It said discussing it publicly could compromise their investigation. It said legal action might be taken against anyone who spread false information. Mom called it a threat, and she was right about that too. I spent the next week writing out what I wanted to say at the school board meeting. My hands shook so bad I could barely hold the pencil, but I kept writing anyway. I wrote about the pain and the fear and dying for 38 seconds. I practiced reading it over and over in my room. My voice cracked the first 10 times, but eventually I got through it without crying. Mom said I was brave, but I didn't feel feel brave. I just felt angry. The night of the board meeting, my stomach hurt almost as bad as when my appendix burst. Mom held my hand while we waited for my turn to speak. The room was packed with people. When they called my name, I walked to the podium on shaking legs. I looked out at 200 faces staring back at me. I started reading about Herbert stepping over my body while I was dying. 3 board members stared at their phones the whole time. 2 others looked at the ceiling. Only Elisa Huber actually watched me and wrote down what I was saying. When I finished talking, the room was completely quiet. I walked back to my seat on shaking legs while everyone just stared at me. And nobody said anything for what felt like forever, until finally the board president cleared his throat and said they'd take my comments under advisement, which basically meant they'd ignore everything I just said. The meeting went on for another hour with people arguing about bus routes and lunch menus, while I sat there feeling like I'd wasted my time trying to make them care about a kid almost dying in their school. When we got home, Mom made me hot chocolate and told me I was brave, but I just felt tired and angry and scared all at the same time. The next morning, I went to the school for the first time in weeks, and when I opened my locker, a folded piece of paper fell out onto the floor. I picked it up and unfolded it, and my hands started shaking when I read what it said, because someone had written that I was a drama queen looking for attention, and that Mr. Herbert was a good teacher being railroaded by a lying student. The handwriting looked familiar, and then I remembered seeing those same weird capital R's on the whiteboard in biology class, which meant Herbert himself had been in the school putting notes in student lockers. I took the note straight to the office, but the secretary just said she'd pass it along to the principal, who was in meetings all day, and probably wouldn't do anything about it anyway. Mom was so mad when I told her that she drove straight to the district office and filled out a FOIA request for all the security footage and emails and any documentation about what happened to me. The woman at the desk said it would take 6 to 8 weeks to process, which seemed like they were stalling on purpose since it should only take a few days to pull some files. While we were waiting, Mom's friend who worked in the district office called and said we should come look at something right away, so we drove back over there. She had the official incident report that the principal filed, and when we read it, we couldn't believe what we were seeing because it had the wrong date and said I was just experiencing discomfort during a routine drill. The report didn't mention that I died for 38 seconds or that they had to remove parts of my organs or that Herbert stepped over my convulsing body while refusing to call for help. Mom took pictures of every page with her phone while her friend kept watch at the door because she wasn't supposed to be showing us this stuff, but she said she couldn't stay quiet when they were lying about what happened. The next day, when Mom was picking me up from the school, the janitor who'd been mopping the hallway during the lockdown walked over to our car and looked around to make sure nobody was watching. He leaned down to the window and told Mom he'd heard screaming and pounding from inside the classroom, but when he tried to check what was happening, the vice principal told him to keep working and not get involved. He said administration told all the custodial staff not to discuss what they saw or heard that day, or they'd lose their jobs, but he had grandkids my age and couldn't live with staying quiet. Mr. Herbert putting that note in the locker himself? The weird capital R's matching his whiteboard writing makes me really curious about his state of mind right now. Who does that to a kid who almost died in their classroom? Mom gave him her number and told him to call if he remembered anything else or if anyone threatened him for talking to us. That weekend, Ravi Holder from the local newspaper called our house and said he'd gotten an anonymous tip about what happened and wanted to investigate the story. Someone inside the district was feeding him information about how they were trying to cover everything up, and he had copies of emails between administrators discussing how to minimize the situation. He came over with a recorder and interviewed me for 3 hours about every detail I could remember, while Mom sat next to me holding my hand when I started crying. The article wouldn't come out for another week, but at least someone was finally going to tell the truth about what really happened in that classroom. Monday morning in chemistry class, someone dropped their textbook, and it made this huge bang that sounded exactly like Trevor hitting the door, trying to break it down. Before I even knew what was happening, I was under my desk, curled up in a ball, sobbing and shaking, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't stop seeing Herbert's face smiling at me while I was dying. The teacher had to clear the whole room, while the counselor came and sat on the floor next to me, talking in this quiet voice until I could finally crawl back out. But by then, everyone in the school knew I'd had a total meltdown. The counselor walked me to the nurse's office where Mom came to pick me up, and we went straight to meet with a lawyer who specialized in educational negligence cases. She looked through all our documentation and said we had one of the strongest cases she'd ever seen, but warned us the district would try to blame me for not being clear enough about my symptoms, even though I'd literally been screaming that my appendix was rupturing. She said they'd drag this out for years if they could, and try to make my life so miserable that we'd give up and go away, but Mom said we weren't going anywhere until they admitted what they did. 2 days later, the district released the statement calling the whole thing a learning opportunity and announcing new training for substitute teachers, but they never once mentioned Herbert by name or said that I almost died. The statement made it sound like it was just a misunderstanding during a drill and that they were being proactive about improving their procedures when really they were just trying to make it go away. That afternoon at the grocery store, I was getting milk while Mom was at the deli counter, and I heard 2 parents from the school talking in the next aisle about how I was trying to ruin a good man's career over a simple misunderstanding. They said Herbert had been teaching for 20 years and one dramatic teenager shouldn't be able to destroy his reputation, and I wanted to scream at them that he literally watched me die, but I just stood there holding the milk and trying not to cry. When we got home, there was a letter from the insurance company saying they were denying coverage for my follow-up treatments because they weren't directly related to the initial emergency, even though the whole reason I needed ongoing care was because the infection had spread so far while Herbert kept me locked in that room. The bills were already over $30,000 and climbing every day, and Mom was working extra shifts to try to pay them while also taking time off for all my appointments and meetings with lawyers. The next morning, Elisa Huber called Mom while I was eating breakfast and said she had contacts at the State Department of Education who were really interested in what happened to me. She'd been on the phone with them for 2 hours the night before going through all the details, and they were shocked that a teacher would lock a dying student in a classroom. Mom put her on speaker, and Elisa explained that the district wasn't taking this seriously enough, so she was going around them to get a real investigation started. She said her friend at the state level had already opened a file and was gathering information about our district's safety protocols. While Mom was talking to her, I searched online for Mr. Herbert's name and found something that made my stomach drop. There were 2 old news articles from different schools where parents had complained about him not letting sick kids leave his classroom. One kid had thrown up all over his